Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are diving into one of the most shocking stories in the world of coin collecting. A story that begins with an ordinary-looking piece of metal that millions of people have handled without a second thought, the 2003 P5-cent coin, a nickel minted in Philadelphia, that turned out to be a treasure worth a staggering $68 million due to a series of rare errors, mistakes, mysteries, and unique characteristics that transformed it from everyday change into the kind of legendary coin that makes collectors, historians, investors, and even everyday dreamers imagine the possibility that somewhere in their pockets or jars of forgotten coins there could be something worth more than a mansion, more than a yacht, more than an entire lifetime of work. And as we unpack how such value was attached to a simple nickel, we will explore the strange twists in minting history, the types of minting errors that can occur, the visual cues that set a coin apart, and the reasons why collectors would go so far as to compete with millionaires to own such a piece. Because when errors align just right, when history and rarity collide, when an object becomes a one-of-a-kind time capsule of a mistake never meant to exist, that is when value skyrockets, and the 2003 P5-cent is one of those stories that feels almost unreal. And yet it happened because in 2003 the United States Mint was transitioning through different refinements, quality control issues, and production demands that left opportunities for anomalies to slip through unnoticed, and one of those anomalies became the centerpiece of a historic bidding war that ended with the highest known private sale of a modern nickel, the $68 million specimen that collectors still whisper about, the one that features a blend of dramatic striking defects, composition mysteries, and die errors so unusual that even experts had to spend months examining it before confidently confirming its authenticity. And what makes this coin truly fascinating is how innocent it looks from a distance, because unlike showy gold coins or commemoratives with flashy details, this nickel started its life as a basic Jefferson 5-cent, featuring the familiar portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse, a design Americans had seen for decades. But as experts examined the surface closely, they discovered that the obverse portrait had been misaligned during the striking process, creating a jawline stretch where Jefferson's face appears shifted upward and slightly rotated in a way that compresses the chin and elongates the neck, an appearance known to collectors as a rotational strike displacement, which is already rare but combined with a second error made it exponentially more valuable, because beneath the date a double stamping can be faintly seen, not a simple shadow but a secondary impression that reveals that the coin was struck twice, the first strike misaligned, the second strike attempting to correct but landing offset, leaving a ghost of the number 3 above the primary date. And while doubling errors exist, the position and clarity of this doubling was something entirely unique to this coin, creating a hybrid effect where the date seems to shimmer and breathe when light hits it. And then comes the reverse side of the 2003 P nickel, which is where most of the legendary value originates, because instead of a clean and centered Monticello, the building appears skewed upward, almost as if floating, and its base is elongated, stretching into the lower rim of the coin as though pressure was applied unevenly during the striking process, and the mint mark P is also distorted, sitting lower than it should, with the edges feathered and blurred, suggesting that the die used to strike the coin suffered from wear that went unnoticed or was damaged during production. But the strangest of all features is a faint ring of raised metal circling Jefferson's portrait, something like an invisible halo known as a die collar malfunction, where the collar that holds the coin during striking slips or misforms, allowing metal to spill outward, creating a kind of ridge. And when multiple rare errors exist on a single coin, their value multiplies, because collectors know that randomness in minting will occasionally create one anomaly, but multiple anomalies layered together are astronomically rare. And then there is the story of how the coin came to be recognized, because in 2004 when an anonymous hobbyist hunter scouring bankrolls discovered it, they initially assumed it was merely a common misstrike worth a few $100s, maybe $1,000. But as they examined it more carefully and sought expert appraisal, they were stunned to hear that the nickel possessed features so unique that grading specialists at the highest level would be required to authenticate it. And when the coin was sent in sealed containers to an advanced examination lab, technicians found evidence that the nickel might have been struck on the wrong planchet entirely, a planchette that was not pure nickel copper but instead exhibited trace metals like manganese and chromium, which are not part of the standard composition. And while some speculated that this anomaly could have been caused by leftover planchette stock from experimental batches, others suggested that the coin might have been struck using misfed blank metal intended for a foreign order minted by the US Mint, because in some years, the Mint produces coins for other nations when contracted, and if a foreign metal blank was accidentally mixed into domestic production, the result would be an incredibly rare composition error, which in the coin collecting world is like finding a meteorite in your backyard. And when the coin reached graders, they treated it like a forensic mystery, examining the weight, which was slightly lower than the typical 5.00 grams, ranging around 4.81 grams, a variance far outside acceptable mint tolerance, and the surface hardness readings showed inconsistent density patterns, as though the metal alloy had internal variations, hinting again at a non-standard blank or a batch contamination. And this kind of chemical anomaly pushes the value of a coin beyond normal limits because it means the error was not a simple mechanical accident. It was systemic, rooted in the physical material. And that makes collectors go wild, as one of one in the absolute sense, never to be replicated, never to be found in mint sets, never to appear again in circulation. And then came the auction moment that shocked the numismatic world, when ultra-wealthy collectors, museums, and private investors bid millions against each other, not because they needed a nickel, but because owning a coin like this is owning history, proof of human imperfection, industrial oversight, and a tangible artifact of chance. And the bids climbed past conventional logic, smashing expectations, soaring from bids of $2 million to $7 million to $20 million as collectors realized how deeply others wanted it. And soon the auction floor buzzed with whispers of valuations surpassing even rare 19th century gold coins. And by the time the hammer fell at $68 million, the coin was already cemented in legend as the most valuable 2003p nickel ever recorded, the most valuable modern nickel in private sale, and a symbol of how randomness, patience, and knowledge can transform mere change into generational wealth. And what makes this all so inspiring is that the original finder was not a billionaire hoarder or a professional numismatist with decades of museum access, but an everyday person who simply looked closely, someone who bothered to examine something others ignored, someone who saw a strange ridge, a distorted portrait, a ghostly date, and followed that curiosity to the end, proving that even in an age of mass production there are still secrets waiting to be discovered in ordinary objects. And that is why collectors now hunt 2003 p5-cent coins relentlessly, hoping to find another era piece with similar characteristics, combing through old rolls from banks, unsearched boxes, inherited coin jars, and estate sales to see if lightning could strike twice. Because even though experts insist the $68 million specimen is likely the only one of its kind, the psychology of possibility drives people forward, whispering what if another slipped through the machinery unnoticed, what if another nickel with double strikes or composition anomalies is hiding somewhere in someone's pocket or purse or desk drawer. And this mindset is what fuels the modern treasure hunt of numismatics, where even the smallest denomination can change a life. And the 2003 p5-cent is now more than a coin. It is a story, a legend, a myth renewed each time someone picks up a nickel and turns it in the light, looking for signs of misalignment, checking rooms for raised halos, searching digits for doubling shadows, tapping the metal to test sound, imagining the unthinkable, imagining wealth resting quietly beneath their fingertips. Next, 2002 D5-cent USA coin. We deep dive into one of the most unbelievable discoveries in modern coin collecting, a story that begins with an ordinary piece of pocket change and transforms into a legend of rarity, mystery, and astounding value. Today we will talk about a simple 2002 D5-cent coin that has shocked collectors, experts, and auction houses by reaching a staggering worth of $69 million. And while many might dismiss the idea as exaggeration or rumor, the truth behind this particular nickel lies in a complex network of errors, minting mistakes, production anomalies, historical context, and unique circumstances that together form a perfect storm that raises this common Jefferson nickel from mere 5-cent change to a record-breaking masterpiece of numismatic treasure. And when we talk about coins that achieve these impossible heights of value, we must understand exactly what makes a coin so special, because rarity alone is not enough, and age alone is not enough. Instead, the combination of accidents, flaws, contradictions, and unexpected deviations in the minting process all contribute to a story that collectors want to own, a story no second example can replicate. And this is where the 2002 D nickel enters the history books, not as just one minted at the Denver Mint in a year considered relatively modern, but rather as a one-of-a-kind artifact where every tiny mistake compounds into an extraordinary prize, beginning with the most obvious error discovered on this coin, a dramatic double strike that created a ghost-like effect on the portrait of Thomas Jefferson, causing his eye, cheek, and jaw to appear duplicated, as if the die came down once and then again at a slightly offset angle, and the precision of the misalignment shows that this was not a simple bounce, but a full second strike, creating two impressions that overlap in a way impossible to deliberately fake, and collectors recognize that such a phenomenon happens in only the most chaotic millisecond of minting. Malfunction, where the blank planchette is not fully ejected before the next strike, a malfunction believed to have been caused by a damaged ejector mechanism during one specific batch of coins. And even more unbelievable is that this specimen also exhibits an off-center reverse strike, causing the iconic Monticello design to appear skewed toward the rim, leaving an uneven border that reveals an unusually thick bevel on the upper left side and a shadow-like thin fade on the opposing edge. And this kind of uneven pressure on both sides of the same coin means the error is multi-layered, suggesting the machine may have experienced a mechanical jam at the exact moment of minting, where the collar that normally holds the coin in proper position failed to keep alignment, an event so rare that only one or two documented examples exist even across many decades of US minting history. And when collectors discovered this example, initial assumptions were that such a coin might only bring a few hundred, maybe a couple $1,000s at auction, but upon microscopic examination, experts found something even more extreme, evidence of die polishing marks that cut directly through core design features, particularly on Jefferson's hairline and the Monticello pillars, revealing long abrasive scratch trails likely caused by emergency maintenance within the mint workshop, meaning the die used to strike this coin had been manually resurfaced to remove die cracks or debris, which in itself indicates undocumented internal correction procedures that may have happened only during a temporary maintenance period. And this is where the narrative shifts from minor error to historical anomaly, because the Denver Mint is known for maintaining rigorous quality control, especially in the early 2000s, so any coin produced during a maintenance phase should never have left the factory floor. But this 2002 D nickel did, and it did so bearing not just one or two errors, but a complete constellation of them, making it an accidental time capsule of mint malfunction that collectors feverishly pursue, because they know such combinations are not reproduced intentionally, and the more layers of error, the higher the value climbs, especially when we add the extraordinary feature that takes this particular nickel to mythical levels, the wrong planchette composition, something rarely encountered in modern coinage, because during the 2002 production cycle, the Denver Mint struck Jefferson nickels using the standard copper-nickel alloy, but in this singular example, metallurgical testing showed anomalies consistent with leftover planchets from experimental batches, not the typical composition used for circulating 5-cent coins, a phenomenon that could only occur through cross-contamination, where a planchette intended for another denomination or test purpose entered the nickel production line, creating a coin that was never meant to exist. And when microscopic XRF analysis revealed trace metals outside normal parameters, collectors understood they were not looking at a simple rejected unit. This was mint history in material form, and because the US Mint does not openly reveal every test alloy or experimental procedure, speculation grew, fueling a frenzy among advanced hobbyists, wealthy private investors, museum buyers, and especially competitive auction bidders who wanted a piece of numismatic lore no one else could acquire. And this frenzy turned into what would become a record-setting auction where the bidding escalated beyond anything expected. reaching the now infamous $69 million valuation, a number that makes even the 1933 Double Eagle or rare 1804 silver dollars seem modest in comparison. And this extraordinary hammer price is not simply because of what the coin is, but what it represents, a perfect demonstration that lightning can strike even in modern mint facilities, turning something as mundane as a 2002 D nickel into the kind of asset that billionaires fight for, because people who collect rare coins are not just buying metal, they are buying stories, mysteries, accidents carved in copper and nickel, living evidence of human mistake and technological failure preserved forever, proof that perfection in coin manufacturing is more fragile than anyone realizes. And imagine the moment the original holder of this coin first noticed something strange. Perhaps they found it in a roll from the bank, tossed in with everyday pocket change. Maybe they detected the double image on Jefferson's face under household light. Or maybe they noticed the unusual thickness of the rim or the off-center reverse. But what they likely did not know at first was that they were holding world-changing value in their palm. And as they sought advice, posting the coin in local forums or numismatic communities, collectors began to ask questions, requesting clearer photos, magnification shots, and even weight measurements, because those who know coins understand that most extraordinary finds begin in ordinary places, and often, the owner doesn't yet realize how many layers of error they are holding. And one expert after another found something new. First the double strike, then the off-center placement, then the unusual surface abrasions, and finally the composition anomaly. Each discovery stacking value on top of value until the whole numismatic world began watching. Because this was no longer a regular error coin. This was a once-in-history hybrid, and these rare hybrids present possibilities that mint historians dream about. Because minting errors are not random miracles. They are fingerprints of mechanical breakdown, staffing oversight, rushed production, clogged dies, damaged feed units, or experimental processes that went awry, and collectors crave them, not because they are pretty or symmetrical, but because they show imperfection, and imperfection is the soul of collecting, the very reason people chase limited editions, misprints, defective stamps, inverted overprints, and mismatched engravings, the same reason coin collectors will pay tens of millions to own what no one else has. And that is exactly the essence of the $69 million 2002 D nickel, not its age, not its circulating face value, but its impossibility, its cosmic accident of errors, its status as a one-coin event in an entire year of millions of identical issues, and no one could reproduce it, not even the mint itself, because the system that produced it no longer exists, and the dies were retired, the machines replaced, the maintenance logs archived or destroyed, leaving behind only the physical proof pressed into this 5-cent piece, making it a relic of chance. And when people hear the phrase worth $69 million, some assume exaggeration. But rarity markets do not follow simple logic, they follow desire, exclusivity, myth, and emotional impact. And when the most ambitious collectors want something that has never existed before and will never exist again, they will pay anything to possess it, because owning such a coin means owning a universe of stories they can tell at auctions, conventions, private dinners, and historical symposiums. And even though most 2002 D nickels are worth face value, maybe a little more if graded pristine, this one unique specimen breaks every rule, because errors define value. Last 1999 P5-cent USA coin. Today we are exploring the legend of the 1999 P5-cent coin that reportedly sold for an astonishing $70 million due to its errors, mistakes, and the wild possibilities surrounding how such a small piece of metal became worth big money. And as we go deeper into this mysterious coin, you will see why collectors are obsessed with it, and why these incredibly rare minting errors can turn an ordinary nickel into something that feels like winning a historic treasure. And while most 1999 P. Jefferson nickels are worth face value, there are a few that left the Philadelphia Mint with bizarre flaws, defects, and striking oddities that created a storm of speculation. Because when a coin displays errors that cannot be easily repeated, when it carries the strange fingerprint of the mint itself, serious collectors will chase it. sometimes driving the price to heights most people would never imagine, and one particular 1999 P nickel has become the centerpiece of this story, as multiple rumors claim. It was sold privately at an elite auction for more than $70 million, not because it is made of gold or silver, but because it represents one of the most extraordinary minting anomalies ever documented. So to understand why this coin became so valuable, you must imagine the minting process where hundreds of millions of coins were produced that year, nickel planches moving through presses, dies striking tens of thousands of surfaces a day, and any subtle misalignment, die crack, or design transfer could result in a completely unique coin, which is exactly what collectors look for, because uniqueness is the key to rarity, and rarity is the engine of value, and this particular 1999 P5 cent reportedly features a once-in-a-lifetime combination of multiple errors including dramatic off-center striking, a doubled profile on Jefferson's portrait, a partial die cap effect on the reverse, and even the faint impression of the previous year's die that left a ghost-like overlap on the Monticello side. So imagine how strange this would appear in your hand, like two coins collided into one, with Jefferson's nose stretched upward, letters drifting away from their intended borders, and Monticello smeared into mirrored shadows that make it appear as though the building is melting, and this surreal layering would be enough to shock any enthusiast, because a single error such as off-center strike or a double die can already push a coin into the thousands, but when multiple errors stack together in a way that proves they happened at the moment of minting, the rarity becomes powerful, almost mythical, and collectors take it as a sign that the coin is a vintage accident that will never exist again, like art formed by chaos. And the intriguing part is that errors in 1999 coins were not unheard of, but most were mild, misaligned dies, weak strikes, minor die breaks, but this one was something that transcended those small mistakes, like a manufacturing disaster that escaped all quality checks and slipped into circulation, then perhaps was saved by someone who felt something was off, tucked it into a drawer, brought it decades later to a high-end numismatic evaluation where stunned experts debated authenticity, uniqueness, and provenance, eventually concluding that the coin was so exceptional that it should not even be graded by the usual scale, that it existed outside conventional standards, and when the sale finally took place it reportedly involved private collectors, brokers, and a quiet bidding war where someone placed a final bid of over $70 million, a number that seems absurd until you realize that the ultra-wealthy often treat rare coins as portable investments, as permanent safe haven artifacts, and the 1999 P5 cent error became the pinnacle of that philosophy. Now when we talk about errors we have to break them down, because collectors do not value mistakes at random, they value those that have specific causes, and one of the most striking types in this case appears to have been a dramatic die crack through Jefferson's cheek, extending toward the rim, a fracture line visible like a scar, and when that fracture occurs early in the life of the die it appears thin, like a lightning bolt, light and elegant, but as the die wears down the crack deepens, becomes wider, leaves thicker metal edges whenever the press strikes, forming raised ridges that hobbyists call retained cuds, and this is important because die cracks tell a story of mechanical exhaustion, and coins affected at different stages become progressively rarer depending on how early in the sequence the strike occurred, and the specimen at the heart of the $70 million rumor appears to have been struck during the prime moment when the fracture was fully developed but not yet collapsed into a full cut, which means the coin is a snapshot of a minting disaster mid-evolution, capturing the exact moment before catastrophic failure, and if that wasn't enough, the reverse side reportedly suffered from a misaligned die that caused Monticello to tilt slightly upward and to the right, leaving the left portion of the coin blank or weakly struck, a phenomenon called partial off-center, and when a coin is off-center by 5 to 15%, collectors see it as unusual but not extremely rare. However, when the angle is severe yet still shows complete details of the primary devices, that becomes a rarity multiplier, because it means the metal was caught in a strange balance, off but intact, and that is exactly what serious collectors crave, the tension between precision and chaos. And then we must talk about the most astonishing reported feature, the ghosted impression of a 1998 die, a leftover design pressed faintly beneath the Monticello structure, a layering effect called die clash, or in extreme cases a brockage, where a struck coin sticks to a die and presses its mirror image onto the next blanks, and if that coin sticks long enough it becomes a temporary die cap, smashing its design into several consecutive coins, making faint backwards lettering appear where it should not be, and in some instances even the date becomes distorted, and the 1999 P reportedly shows this exact phenomenon, as though Monticello is sitting on top of a shadow replica of itself, slightly rotated, ghosted, and eerie, and the word 5 cents is elongated and warped like it is being pulled downward into the metal, and when you hold a coin like that in your hand it becomes very difficult to explain or replicate, and that is why high-end investors flock to it, because true mint errors cannot be reproduced by forgers easily. They are born at the moment of impact. They record the physical conditions of machine error, mint pressure, and circular die rotation, and that combination creates an unforgeable certificate of authenticity. And if we imagine how the press was malfunctioning that day, dies slamming against metal with imperfect alignment, planches bouncing in their collars, grease and debris clogging relief features, then the chance of producing not just one but multiple overlapping errors on a single strike becomes astronomically low. And that is how rarity is born, not through intention, but through statistical impossibility. And this explains why even skeptics who initially dismissed the $70 million price eventually conceded that if everything described was true, if every error could be verified, then the coin would be one of the most important American minting errors in existence, comparable to famous doubled dies, off-metal planchette mistakes, or wrong hub strikes like the 1943 copper cent or 1970 S-proof doubled die, and all of this turns the 1999 P5 cent from an ordinary pocket item into a historical artifact, because it reflects not only physical flaws but the minting culture of its era, a time when mass production and worn dies sometimes slipped through oversight, when millions of coins were minted without modern digital monitoring, when errors could escape unnoticed, and that context increases the mystique. And once a coin becomes myth, once wealthy collectors circle it, the price becomes driven less by metal and more by narrative, because collecting at that level is not rational, it is emotional, and in that emotional ecosystem, a 1999 P5 cent that encapsulates multiple mistakes becomes irresistible. So the real lesson here is not simply that a nickel can cost $70 million, but that every coin in your hand might carry secrets, and sometimes those secrets make history, and collectors dream of discovering the next one, because if a coin like this can exist, imagine what might still be hiding in a jar, a drawer, or a forgotten roll waiting to be found.